And boom, we're live. Hello and welcome everybody to the Why Bother Warhammer. Finally, we finally organised it. We're back in session after a long time. That's okay. We got there. We got there in the end. With me today is a beautiful, handsome human being, Kirby. How you doing, buddy?
Good, mate. How you going, Sam?
Better now I'm talking to you. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And it's even better when the ACT boys beat your ass in TTS and take out the league, but that's all right. That's another topic for another day.
Rowan and I had a gentleman's agreement. Every time everyone ducked out of the chat, like we're going to give this to you guys, right? So we just prepped you for ACT. We're going to get you back there.
There you go. That's fair. Just that's you got to hustle them, right?
Absolutely.
So unfortunately, not here to talk about the Tyranid mirror for an hour and a half. Or maybe fortunately, we're not going to talk about it here. But talk about a more serious topic. But so talking about mental health and but also about the New South Wales team now heading to ANZTC. So, but before we get deep dive into things, Kirby, for people who've never heard about you, like how long have you been playing 40k for, and like where do you play? So I know you're from New South Wales, but like in Sydney or somewhere else.
So how long have I been playing 40k? Probably 2.5 decades now. So it would have been actually when I was up in Queensland and got introduced to 40k there, and the rest is history, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending how you look at it. And yeah, based in Sydney at the moment. Play really in Sydney. Obviously, go up and down the coast. A couple of tournaments down at Canberra. I think you hosted one down in Canberra last year at Joel.
Yeah, bingo. Yeah. No Retreat, I think it was called. Yeah, like
No Retreat.
Yeah.
Yeah, the time's weird. It's all gone. But yeah, so pretty active, I guess, in the local scene. Sometimes I'll dip in and out. I've taken whole editions off before. Normally just lose the vibe or lose the enjoyment out of it and just take a bit of a break.
Yeah, and like I understand. So, are you you're a Tau enthusiast and Tau lover? So you love all things communist and I guess blue essentially with your Tau, or do you sound? But I've seen you flirt with some other factions along the way.
Yeah, so I've got too many armies. Again, collecting for 2.5 decades, so you pick up a few over the years. Tau is probably the one that I come back to the most. And then what this year has been definitely playing a lot of different armies and getting a lot of the older ones that I've not played since maybe 5th edition, 6th edition, ready for whatever 10th edition is. So it's been a bit of a painting challenge and encouragement. So the current one is rebasing all the old Tyranids, which that's going to take a while.
Many 32mm bases or 28.5s being used on gaunts and stuff like that, or extenders. Yeah. Fun times.
I'm changing the basing style, so I'm doing completely different bases, but it is a little bit fiddly and time consuming. So we'll see if I get it done, but I'm sure at some point I will.
One day, maybe in the 11th edition, but one day you'll have it done. Or 12, maybe 12. But no, maybe 12, maybe 12. We won't push you too quickly. So yeah, and I know you have some beautiful painted armies. I especially love your Tau, the beautiful blue, and I know the basing is amazing. So, but I know you paid for those, but that's okay. We still appreciate them anyway. So
I did pay for them. Painted them myself. I'm into the thing of bases now. So
it's all good. No, it's beautiful. Your armies look great, and I know you're a stellar of the New South Wales community, and as of such, obviously, rightfully so, got nominated captain for this upcoming, I guess, campaign for New South Wales. So, hooroo. Yeah. But you weren't part of the squad. Like, what's going on there? Like, you weren't part of the 16.
We're doing something a little different. So, conscious that there's often a lot of responsibilities put on the captain. So, particularly if you're playing your own games, normally the captain is historically one of the better players. Like if we're looking at WTC, for example, like Liam and Eric have obviously done a great job last couple of years for Team Australia. Two fantastic players, worldwide respected, and trying to manage doing your games and then also what's going on with the team and what are some of the strategies that we're needing to use there, while also managing the team environment itself as a team. Again, looking at the Australian WTC team, they had a really great camaraderie and group cohesion. And so really trying to emulate that and having somebody who's maybe not having to get involved in the games as much, being able to more take on maybe a leadership role and then seeing how that goes. This may blow up in our faces, We have no idea. It's the first time we're trying this, but we're going to give it a red hot go.
Yeah, that makes more sense. And like, obviously, a selfless deed of being non-playing captain per se, and like, but helping to do that leadership role and helping mentor all the other 16 candidates. So we'll talk about that later. So, but the main topic, I guess, for this episode is a bit about mental health, and like,
Yeah.
I guess a big warning. So this is not professional medical advice. Please go see a medical professional. If you are ever suffering or dealing with something, please go see a medical professional. It's not an issue to do so. It's very brave and it's a good thing to do. So, and then without divulging too much about Kirby's backstory, but he's got a lot of history and experience in this field. So that's why he's on the show, and we'll talk a bit openly about it and what you can and cannot do. So, yeah, Kirby, anything else you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I think particularly after COVID, there was a lot of different experiences that a lot of people had. Obviously, a lot of social isolation. If we look at in Australia in particular, places like Melbourne and Sydney had quite a lot of lockdowns, and that threw into stark relief our mental health and experiences there. It's still an evolving conversation. There's still quite a lot of stigma around it. So any ways that we can break down that barrier and help mental health be a normal everyday topic is better in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely agreed, 100%. And we'll talk about it also later as well. But I'll say it now: like, I'm not the only person doing this sort of stuff. There's other great Warhammer people doing it. So I know the Normal Blokes. They've just run a recent Movember campaign. So something that's very popular in Australia is like running, growing mustaches for November and raising money and doing things along the way, which is fantastic. And then the guys at Contact Lost, they have a weekly thing called Thoughtful Thursday. So it's just a nice little post. It doesn't have to be anything too crazy, but it's nice just to reflect. And then they've had other topics of people are neurodivergent and different backgrounds. So if you ever want some resources there, but also there's some other resources linked down below. But before we sort of deep dive into, I guess, deeper topics, so I guess what is mental health? Like, you always hear it's like I would say a buzzword per se, but like, what does it mean? Like, what is it generally? Is it? I mean, the hint's probably in the name as well, but like, for you, what does it mean, Kirby?
So, super brief background around myself. The reason why Sam's talking to me today is background in psychology. Been practicing psychology for probably a decade and a half now. In a mix of roles, private practice, organizations doing things like occupational rehab or general practices, like where you might see a GP or something. And so going back to Sam, your question, what is mental health? If we look at what is health, normally you go to a doctor when you're feeling unwell. You got the cold, you got COVID, for example. You go to a doctor and they might prescribe something, or if it's a virus, they might provide some sort of medication. Again, obviously not speaking as a doctor there. You might have to go to a physio to get some strained muscle. They'll give you some stretches or things like that. And the mental health side is normally when there's something going on from our brain perspective. It can have sometimes some neurological components, but there's normally something that's going on that's making us, it's either impacting our behaviors or impacting how we're feeling and our emotional state. And that will then normally have cascading effects in other areas. Normally what we're looking at is what's the impact in your social function, occupational, educational function, anything personal that you might be doing. So engagement and hobbies like Warhammer, for example, relationships and stuff like that. So anything really that's impacting it that doesn't fall under the medical branch, like, oh, you've got a cold or you've broken an arm or something.
Yeah, absolutely. And like very similar to breaking arm, it's pretty obvious when you break an arm, eh? Like when it's maybe dangling down and stuff like that. It's like, oh, something's a bit wrong. But sometimes, generally a bit obvious unless the adrenaline's running super well. But mental health obviously sometimes can be very unseen, and like you don't know what's going on behind the scenes, and people can suffer in silence, unfortunately, which is really sad. So I guess why is it important to talk about? Like, the old stigma one was just grow up and like deal with it. Like, this is life per se. But why is it important to talk about? So, but why? So essentially, so why is it important to talk about and have these open discussions?
Yeah. Well, we're going to use the broken arm as an example because it's a really easy one. If you got bone sticking out and you just leave it alone, something bad's going to happen. You'll probably get an infection. Obviously, your use of that arm is probably not going to be very good ongoing, even if it's a really small one. So if you've got like a fracture underneath the surface, if it heals incorrectly, it's going to impact your ability to really have good function in that arm. So mental health, the same thing. Without going and downloading a whole bunch of science on everybody, effectively the chemicals that are in our brain, we call them neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin. People have probably heard of chemicals like that. They're what help the brain operate. It's like if you put most cars have got, so this is the type of petrol that you can take. If you try to put the wrong petrol or gas in it, it's not going to work, or it's not going to work as well. Similar sort of concept from the neurotransmitters. If we're not getting those correct chemical balances, it's really hard to do something, even if we enjoy it. Being able to do something social or do a hobby activity, if we're low on some of those chemicals, gets really challenging. And the really tricky part about mental health is those are the things that also will give us those chemicals. Sitting out and playing Warhammer with some mates, for example, if that's what you enjoy, it's going to give you some of those neurotransmitters, and it ends up being a really negative cycle if we don't have them. So in terms of talking about it, very similar to going to the doctor and getting an x-ray and getting a cast on, those things that we can obviously do to try and help bridge that gap to create more healthy balance and production of some of those chemicals.
Yeah, that's a fantastic example, and it makes sense to me. So hopefully it makes sense to you at home. So I'm definitely no science bro, so that makes sense to me. And like that's great. That's a good, simple explanation. That's really helpful, and I think it's an important topic to have. And like it can happen to anyone, no matter how rich or poor you are, or like from any background. It's anyone can be affected. So it's great to talk about and like obviously recognize. So I guess like to maybe not as deep or heavy, but like, so what is Warhammer like as a hobby for helping or improving one's mental health? So I know you talked about they're going to events or like having it happen. So how, like, and noting that it's a healthy hobby, as long as you keep it healthy, like how does it help people with mental health? So, or how, maybe for yourself, or how have you seen, or for others maybe per se?
Yeah. So speaking in very broad generalizations here, obviously everybody is going to be very different. And I often make the joke that Warhammer is about 17 hobbies in one. There's things like planning, actually purchasing, unboxing, assembling, painting, etc., to the actual I'm playing at a tournament or I'm playing with my mates, just like the beer and pretzel style game. What I think Warhammer as a hobby broadly allows you to do is there's a lot of social interaction, and at base experience as humans are social creatures. The vast majority of us need some level of social connection. Even the most introverted of us likes to have social connections, just in a particular way compared to the extrovert. Painting, Chris, is something that you never do. I'm very well aware of that. Stop using Alex's models. So being able to have some of that social interaction, particularly if it's over a joint experience or a joint venture, there's normally going to be a connection there. There's a reason why things like expat pubs, there's an Irish pub almost in every country in the world. Don't at me if I'm wrong there. I'm sure there's probably one or two that do not have an Irish pub. But for the most part, things like certain cuisines or pubs or clubs exist in other parts of the world, and will naturally feel a level of affinity there because there's some concept of shared experiences. We all grew up in Australia, so we know that mate is just a casual word that we're going to throw around unless it's said in a particular tone or way. So that connection immediately has a level of response from a mental health perspective. It is producing some of those neurotransmitters. Add in all the other concepts like painting, collecting, hobbying, all that stuff. If those are things that you enjoy, being able to create that, make a plan, have something that follows through fruition, similar sort of process, that's going to produce a lot of those chemicals that we were talking about earlier, give you a sense of satisfaction. If you're someone like Chris who does not like painting, you can always outsource that as well, and you can just focus on the last part.
Yeah, get that serotonin kick right away. Just, hand over some models, pay $1,000, and then get some models painted back, and you get the serotonin. Oh, I painted an army. Well done. Ignore the financial transaction to the side, right? So no, it's that euphoria. Yeah. So hey, look, it's for everyone, right? And like, as that's funny you mentioned that 17 hobbies in one. It's funny when I mentioned, I play Warhammer. It's like that's one hobby, but I was like, I swear there's more to it. Like I do this, I do that. I was like, yeah, it's pretty fair. It's like a lot of hobbies in one, so it makes sense. And that's great. And I think you get those different sort of kicks, and like you have various options to do along the way. So that's fantastic. So how about you, Kirby? Like, do you sort of use Warhammer yourself to manage your mental health, or is that sort of something separate and different? And like, I guess, how do you use it yourself? If you don't mind talking about it, obviously.
That's right. To me, it's a hobby. I think in terms of an everyday dynamic, having a hobby that you enjoy, it doesn't need to necessarily be a mental health management tool. That can just be part of your everyday life, just like you brush your teeth usually once or twice a day, hopefully. Normally we might go to the doctor once a year, even if we're not sick, for a checkup. Obviously, as we all get older, there might be more regular checks that we need to have occur. It's more something that I'd refer to as sort of a maintenance. Obviously, for somebody else, particularly maybe if they have found socializing maybe a challenge, or forming connections or friendships maybe a bit difficult, it can be a really great environment to help with some of that. So if it's something that somebody uses it as an active tool around managing, absolutely fantastic. It can also be something that doesn't necessarily need to be, this is relating to mental health, because I just find this fun. Obviously, that will relate to mental health because everything connects into it, but it doesn't necessarily need to be an active thing.
No, absolutely, that makes more and more sense. So, and obviously something that's enjoyable and fun. Unfortunately, sometimes it can become like, I guess, addiction or obsession. And so this is something I struggle with personally. Is like, I fucking obsess about Warhammer a shit ton, probably way too much, definitely. But it's because it's my love and joy and a passion for it. So I guess a question to ask is like 40K, like many hobbies or interests, can be addictive and an obsession for many. Myself, 100%, I definitely admit it for sure. So I guess, what do you think the line is between obsession, addiction, and like maintaining a healthy relationship with stuff? So like, obviously you want to maintain a healthy relationship, because when you become an obsession, addiction, it causes issues and other things. So how do you sort of balance that line, or what, I guess, what do you generally see and provide advice for? I guess not as a medical professional, but what do you see that line as?
It's a tricky one, because without getting into boring clinical definitions of what addiction is, the most things that we're looking at is what impact is this starting to have outside of your hobby. So we talked before about like your occupation, your education, social relationships, personal relationships, any sort of major area of domain of functioning. If that's starting to be impacted by your engagement with something, that's when it's starting to get, that line's being a little bit blurred. And we might not go, oh, hey, this is an addiction, but maybe this is actually an unhealthy mechanism right now. So really great example from a Warhammer tournament player's perspective. People that are going to tournaments regularly, it's like, oh, I've played Warhammer tournament last weekend, got one this weekend, and I got one the next weekend, and my partner's really upset. That's something that go to a tournament, and you'll normally hear a few people say, or I can't go to that tournament, I've got to spend time with my partner. When that's kind of not on your radar, and oh yeah, I'm not really paying attention to that, or I'm sacrificing that to do this, that's when it's starting to get to your little bit of concern points. If you only have one hobby and it's Warhammer, and you put a lot of time and energy into it, and you're still maintaining what you're doing from a working perspective, maintaining your social relationships, family relationships, any education that you're doing, cool. If you have one hobby and your eggs all in that one hobby basket, even if it has 17 different subtypes of hobby, all right. It's more when it's starting to impact those, oh, I've not gone to work today because I've spent till 7 a.m. painting or something like that. That's when, okay, now it's starting to impact other areas of functioning.
Yeah, well, as you said, like, it affects your relationships and stuff like that. And that's something I personally have to manage. Like, I'm bad. I'm working on it. Like, I work on it as well. Like, I have to put down the phone, like, stop replying to Warhammer things and, like, thinking of that list idea, or be present in the moment. It's something I'm working on and managing, because, like, oh, look, I'm obsessed about it. I care a lot. I have my own personal desires and goals. And, look, I'm working on it. But it's not playing toy soldiers at the end of the day is not worth sacrificing everything in life. So I definitely have to, you have to manage it. Well, for me, it's not okay. Maybe some others, as long as it's healthy and other things. Look, you can make those sacrifices, right? So, no, that's great, and I think some very good advice there. So, so in the 40K community in Warhammer as a whole, it's generally very uplifting, positive, inviting. So, why is it important to have, like, I guess, great safe spaces and, like, important in communities which are very positive, inviting? So I know you and I, for example, we're in a part of a group chat which is very positive. Look, there's obviously a bit of banter and talking shit, which is always positive, but but it's a very good environment. Like, you're always there to support people. So why is it important to have those areas and stuff like that?
Yeah. So safety is obviously a really important concept, because it allows us to be vulnerable safely. It's a bit of a tautology, but we're going to roll with it. Super, again, brief science, blah, blah, blah. There's a concept called a hierarchy of needs. And at our base level of that, we need food, water, clean air, shelter. And if we have all of that, the next ones we're looking at tend to be around social connection and safety. And those are really important. Again, we're social creatures. We want to be able to have these connections and be able to have groups of people, whether it's family or friendship groups, sporting groups, hobby groups, where we can feel like there's a joining of peers. From a safety perspective, being able to do anything safely is obviously important. We look at things like, going into Pavlovian conditioning here, if we look at something like fear as a conditioning concept, if I make you really uncomfortable, you're going to do this thing, you'll learn really quickly, because fear is a great motivator, but it's not going to feel safe. And that means everything else is going to start to get out of whack. All those chemicals that we talked about before, they're not going to be in harmony. Having a space where you can be safe allows you to be vulnerable, which allows you to work through some of those emotional experiences. You mentioned before, there might be a little bit of a history, particularly in certain countries, where it's all just harden up, mate, you'll be right. Classic line of, here's a cup of cement. And if we're holding all of our emotions and we're not talking about them, well, it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And imagine we're carrying around just a single piece of paper, that's fine. But now every day we're carrying around 10 pieces of paper and we're not talking about any of them over a long period of time. Well, now we're carrying a stack of papers and it starts to get heavy. Being able to talk about our emotions and our experiences doesn't solve those papers. It doesn't magically make them disappear, but it lessens their impact. It allows us to process them and we're not holding them as much. So then their weight on us becomes a lot less. Having a space that's socially safe, like a Warhammer group, allows you to express that a lot more. It's a lot easier to do that in a peer group where you feel comfortable compared to going into, I don't know, your boss's office or the principal's office, where there's also a power imbalance, and be like, hi, here are my feelings today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's great sometimes when you have that safe space, you can be vulnerable and open up about your things, and there'll be mates and friends there to support you. So, which is fantastic. And like, look, we all need help from time to time. No one's perfect, and no one's going. So life is hard at times, and it's easy to So it's great to have those areas, and like, oh look, inviting a safe space, like a friendly local gaming store, right? It's like often that's thing said, like you can be inviting and accepting of people, and it allows people to join and be part of the community and group. So it's fantastic. So I guess the thing there, so I know you talked about before, you took whole editions off from time to time and stuff like that. Yeah. So how do you stay interactive with, I guess, Warhammer and your friends and stuff like that, even when you're not playing the game? Like, I know sometimes it's hard, like when the medium per se is, look, I'm playing Warhammer and my other friends want to play Warhammer, but I don't want to. Like, how do you sort of try and stay connected sometimes? Because I'm sure when you took breaks at editions, like you still stayed in touch or were able to connect, come back per se.
Yeah, I think, again, that is a very individual experience. And depending on how you have the connections have been made, is this kind of just like, oh, hey, these are like work friends or school friends. These are my hobby friends. When I'm engaged in the hobby or when I'm there, I'm available. When I'm not so much. Looking at particularly more modern society compared to maybe 20 years ago, when one might have taken a break at that point, it's a lot easier to stay connected. So if somebody I'm going to take like 6 months off or a year hiatus or something, all the group chats that you mentioned before, Sam, they all still exist. So it sometimes can be a little bit easier to engage. Obviously, you can also disconnect from those chats, put them all on mute as well. So I think it's very much going to be an individual experience. If you want to remain connected, it's very easy to, even if it's not necessarily, maybe you're not modeling or painting or playing, but you can still stay connected, have chats with people. If it's, hey, I've just kind of lost enthusiasm for this, I'm not really feeling the vibe. Those are kind of my hobby friends. I might touch base with them a little bit. Maybe you'll have some relationships that exist outside the hobby in relation to that group as well. And then maybe it might be something that you duck back into at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one great thing I know, so Dale's in the chat right. So Daleson, I know so obviously life gets busy. Sometimes you can't play in a 40k event or you can't
Yeah.
play games and stuff like that. But I know
Yeah.
just rocking up the breakfast and stuff like that on the day of the tournament, catching up with people
Yeah.
is a great way to stay connected or through whatever means necessary. So yeah, I know that's
Yeah.
definitely one way to do it. So yeah, so it's awesome. I guess one thing that's easy is when you go to an event, like obviously you want to do well, right? Everyone wants to win at 40k, so you want to do like maybe most people, right? Like depending on your expectations and the standards, and it's very easy to tie like I guess your values and personal beliefs to how you go. Like, look, I went 3-2, now I need to go 4-1, and I need to go 5-0 and stuff like that. And then when you don't go that way, it's very easy to get down and in the dumps about it. So how do you? I got a long story, I guess statement there, but how do you sort of try and disconnect yourself from the results, or like try not to tie your personal well-being to results? Like is it just because like it's just a game and like it's not your own values to it, or like how do you sort of manage those expectations?
So I think a couple of points there. So first, I think really good about setting expectations. So while particularly when we're looking at it from a competitive 40k perspective, a lot of us might go in with like, oh, my goal is ultimately to be able to win a tournament, for example, or maybe I want to win more games than I lose, or it's something like get to the finals or the semis or something along those lines. Not everybody is going to have those expectations. Sometimes it's just, oh, hey, this is a really easy way to get 3, 4, 5 games of Warhammer in. Maybe it's a more social experience. Maybe look at me, I'm showing off some of my models or something along those lines. So everybody's expectations are going to be different, as long as they're not. The word I'll use is maladaptive. Like, I'm going to go make sure everybody has a bad time. Hopefully nobody's thinking like that. But for the mass majority, like whatever your expectations are going into a tournament, awesome. In terms of then expectations and maybe not meeting them, I want to win more games than I lose. I'll go 2-3 instead. And you reference values, and understanding what your expectations are as different to your values are really important. If you're assigning a value to yourself as being the best, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with trying to achieve and push yourself. When we don't meet the expectation around that, what are our behavioral responses to that? We're not going to be able to meet all of our values all the time. We go back to our neurochemicals that we talked about at the beginning. When we tend not to be engaging with our values and meeting them, that's when we're going to get neurochemical imbalances. That can also lead to, okay, this is not happening and I want it to happen. And now my behaviors might change, and maybe in the 40k community, we talk about angle shooting, or maybe there's something like, oh, I've rolled these dice in somewhere maybe where you can't see, or pick them up really quickly, or as if you're assigning this I have to win as a value without anything else, that's where we can sometimes get a bit of friction points, where now our behaviors to meet the values are starting to change. So I think in terms of, and that's not a very common experience. I'm not saying this is everybody absolutely doing that. And I think recognizing what are our expectations, and then if we've not met them, we ask ourselves the question, why? Did I make a mistake? The classic Warhammer player refrain is it was the dice's fault. And confirmation bias is absolutely going to make us remember every single dice that we've done wrong. And without going into really complicated math and quantum statistics, on a tournament whole, the dice are going to average out. Unless you have some cooked dice, and sometimes they might be negatively cooked, not positively cooked. It can go poorly.
Yeah, we don't all have toilet dice, okay? Sorry, Kirby. I know you have some. No, I'm kidding. So, no, but yeah, that's completely fair. And I know a friend recently attended an event, and like he walked away from the event. He was like very disappointed, and I know because like he didn't go as well as he expected. And I know publicly a lot of people, like the big world champs of Warhammer, these are some of the best players in the world. They generally go 4-1, 5-0, win all the events, and many of them went like 0-3 day one, and like that's the first time in like however many years they've gone 0-3, and like. They're like, what? Yeah, absolutely. And like when your expectations or shit happens, right? And like you as a person aren't like, because you went 0-3 is like you're a horrible human being, you're the worst kind of thing ever. That's not true at all. it's an event, right? It's in a game, shit happens. So yeah, I think it's important to recognize and balance those things out. So how do you I guess to add on to that, so often it's very easy to get disappointed in games, right? Like obviously you want to do well, or I definitely want to do well at games, and while still maintaining a positive environment. How do you sort of, I guess, manage some of these expectations and stuff like that? Is it about sort of being realistic about things, or is it sort of like, hey, it's just a game, relax, you made a mistake here, recognizing other things, or just reviewing things? And what do you try and what would be some advice or general consensus, I guess, per se?
A lot of things there again, Sam. We're doing like quadruple barrel questions at the moment.
Sorry.
All good. So I'm going to wind back and you reference like the disconnect, like, oh, like I've gone 0-3, that means I'm a horrible player. When recognizing, like if you've gone 0-3 and you wanted to go 3-2 at a minimum, it's okay to be disappointed. There's nothing wrong with that disappointment. There's nothing wrong with being a bit upset with yourself or a bit, I don't really want to maybe play Warhammer anymore at the moment. Like those big emotions in the moment, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's okay to have those experiences and be disappointed. When we're, I'm a shit person, okay, now this one action is starting to frame how we're looking at ourselves, and that's maybe not as helpful. There's a difference between having an emotional experience and going through it and processing it, not trying to disconnect from it, and then also having that emotional experience start to dictate how you're viewing yourself. It's like we all have that one model that either always fails us or always does something positive, and it's like, that's fine, that's a model, that's an inanimate object. But if it's towards ourselves, it's going to come back to that neurochemical balance, and it's going to disrupt it.
Yeah, and it's very easy like to get into a disruptive cycle and like almost the term like doom spiraling, right? Like you start thinking you're shit, you're bad, why the fuck you do this, blah blah blah. Like and just you be your own worst enemy, right? And like quickly, doom spiral. It's very very easy. So it's important to sort of relax, refresh, and then go back to neutral ground. So
so was it your mate that you're referencing that went 0-3 or?
There was other people, like I know other people who do that. Yeah, as an example. So I just know someone personally, like didn't go well in an event, and like it tied his, I guess, personal values against winning a game of Warhammer, which it wasn't healthy, and then he has had to reflect on that.
Yeah, and like an example there where, like I'm a shit person because I've gone 0-3, and as a mate on the outside looking, it's like, you're not shit. What are you talking about? Like, don't be so hard on yourself. And that's really easy to say, but it's that internal dialogue that obviously becomes doom spiraling, where it becomes unhealthy, and we really start to view ourselves in a negative fashion.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess another sort of element of Warhammer, like sort of socializing, is sometimes it's very hard to go outside, like get some social anxiety. It's becoming a more common thing that people will recognize about. It's like struggling to go outside. So how do you like people who suffer from like something like that, or are scared to like attend their first event or their first, I guess, going to like even a weekly night at the game store? What advice would you give for people maybe to go to these events, and as well as I guess communities to be accepting and inviting of some people like that?
Yeah, so really broad generalizations here, and I'll echo, Sam, what you said before. Like, if that's something that you are having personal difficulties or challenges with, really would recommend talking to your GP, get a referral for a mental health professional, because the broad answers here, they're not going to fit for everybody. They're going to be able to be broadly utilized, and they might help 3 or 4 people, but other places we're going to need to have modifications, tweaks, or something completely different. The really amazing thing about the human experience is we're all different. There's never, I'm very happy to be corrected wrong or shown that I'm wrong here, but there's never going to be a Venn diagram of 2 people superimposed upon each other. Even looking at identical twins, we've got the exact same DNA, but there's going to be behavioral differences because we're our own unique individual. So just prefacing, these are some broad concepts. If you need more specific assistance, please talk to someone about it. But okay, so a question, if we're going somewhere maybe a bit socially anxious, what can we do around it? If you've got a friend or a support person that can come with you, whether they're engaged in Warhammer or not, absolutely. What are the things that you find comfortable? What are the things that you find uncomfortable? So meeting new people might be a challenge, might be uncomfortable. Okay, is there some way that you can have that reduced by having somebody with you? So if we look at when we were kids and our parents were taking us to game stores, little did they know they were getting us into a plastic crack, but here we are. Oh, look, mom and dad are taking me to a game store. That's a little bit safer than having to wander into a store and figure out who everybody is. If there's a regular meet, you might be able to find somebody, again, online, or there might be a group where you can find somebody from that, and they're like, oh, hey, just wanted to try and meet you a little bit online first before coming to the group, maybe ask some questions. If there's some things that that make you uncomfortable or make you more comfortable, you can try and find out a lot more information around it. It takes a lot of introspection to know what we like and don't like, and it's a lot easier to answer the question what we don't like. So the example I might often use here is the what do you want for dinner question. I don't know. Do you want pizza? No. Anything else though? Okay, what about Thai? Not that. Okay, so not Thai pizza. Yeah, but anything else, that's fine. What about pub grub? Not that either. And so it's easy to say, I don't want that. Well, what do you want? I don't know. And it's really hard to sometimes identify that. So it's okay to also go, I know I don't like that, that, and that. Here's how I can support around that. I.e., I'm using this as an example, going with a friend to somewhere. Again, even if they don't play Warhammer, just having a buddy come along. Okay, I know this is a safe person, even though I'm meeting new people in a new environment. Now this buddy has helped me feel safe here. Okay, cool. Now I don't need that buddy. I can do this. If we use a metaphor, it's like floaty devices in a pool. Sooner or later, we can take the floaty devices off and we can swim.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. Like, just take it one step at a time, nice, small, incremental steps, and then until you build that confidence to go further. So I think that's very good advice. And I know something I've always heard, like when you're scared about something, it's like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. Like, just take it one step at a time and what you're willing to do, right? So, but the minimum standards, like, I'm willing to do this little bit, and then I'll do it, and I'll succeed. Correct. Like, walk away, you've done that. So I think that's fantastic advice. And sort of to talk up, so reiterate back before about sort of expectations. So Mark and chat talking about how I got out to going to the club and play the occasional RTT, but is yet being a superstar on the GT stage in AU 40K worth it? So yeah, making those standards and making, I guess, those expectations. So I think it's great to realize and recognize, because it's not for everyone, right? Like, there's sacrifices made to get to that next level. So that's good to recognize. Good, kudos.
And I think that's a really good point there, Sam, and good comment, Mark, because if we look at like the WTC players, and I'm not going to call any of them out at the moment, particularly as examples, but I think a lot of them are very open about their experiences. And just imagine planning and prepping and going to a world championship stage 2 years in a row. And for Australia, that means flying to Europe, which is a day and a bit of travel. It's not a cheap experience. All the really good players in Australia are spread out all across the country, which requires a lot of logistical and potential financial implications to meet up and do training and stuff like that. It takes a lot. And for some people, we go back to our expectations. They're not wanting to go 4-1, 5-0, or undefeated at a GT. They just want to go and have some fun. And that's okay. Just being, hey, this is a social game for me. It gets me out of the house. It gets me engaged with people that I like to hang out with and lets me do something fun. Awesome. That's a great starting point. And you don't need to go any further than that if that's what makes you comfortable and happy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, balancing expectations and doing what you are willing to do. So, look, you're not, what you're willing to do fundamentally at the end of the day. So, yeah, that's fantastic. I guess so. Just to talk about a bit more, go back a bit the anxiety sort of things, and like being more supportive or inviting for people. So, obviously, people suffer from various things. But what can TOs and I guess event organizers do to be more accepting or inviting for people who may suffer from like social anxiety, or they can't do with loud space and stuff like that? So, use an example. So, I know. So Max Guis, so he's talked about pretty publicly, Austrian guy, won a GT, but he suffers like, he stresses a lot with like loud noises, and like he has something to deal with him. And so he talked to his TOs like, hey, I really need to deal. I struggle with loud noises, and the TO was able to organize like a quiet room for him. Like, look, obviously, like organizing a quiet room just to be away from everything. He can't deal with it. Like, it's something that can't deal. And I know at Uprising this year, there was someone who wore literal headphones like me, like I'm wearing right now, because of the loud noise and stuff like that to deal with it. So I guess my question is, so what maybe advice or industry things can like TOs and event organizers do to sort of be invite these people? Because obviously TOs and event organizers do a lot already, but what are some like little small things that people can do?
Yeah, so I think great example with sound sensitivity there, where you have two examples. Where one example, the organization, the TO, the event is making not an accommodation, but having available spaces for people who are going to have different experiences. If we look at wheelchair access to most places in Australia, everywhere has to have some sort of wheelchair access, whether it's a ramp or an elevator for somebody in a wheelchair to get in and out safely. That's just common standard practice. So it's very similar and akin to that, where being able to, in the example with the Austrian gentleman, having a quiet room or quiet spaces available. The challenge I'm conscious of for TOs is we're often trying to scramble or scrounge together spaces, and we don't always have that as an option. Using the GT down a Jolt as an example, I know they've got two little smaller rooms, and that would work really great. It's a great space for a stream, or if somebody's maybe a bit sound sensitive, to have a little bit of a smaller or a bit more private personal space. And I think recognizing we're not always going to be able to accommodate everybody with everything. Like, let's just say everybody's expectation is I'm going to go 5-0 at a GT. Obviously, we can't accommodate everybody going 5-0. And sometimes being able to have a non-judgmental conversation. I really appreciate that you need to have a quiet space. Unfortunately, we're actually not going to be able to accommodate that at the tournament. We don't have like another room available or something like that. And so then working with them and being able to say, like, the other gentleman that you know who's I've got headphones. And that might be a way that they might normally manage sound sensitivity normally in their everyday life. Absolutely, if you want to wear headphones, go for it. The tricky part with something like headphones in a tournament setting is there is quite a lot of verbal interaction between the two players. And so then it's starting from the top, and the TO is about making sure people don't feel singled out. And this is where TO packs or announcements at the beginning of tournaments can be really helpful. They're like, hey, if your opponent's got headphones on or needs to use headphones because they find it really loud, as part of your pre-game conversation, we talk about playing by intent. What do we do with cocked dice? What counts as a cocked dice? What happens with how are we going to manage gotchas and things like that? We do all this talking before games anyways. And if TOs are leading that conversation and saying, hey, that's an okay conversation to have as well. An example of somebody who wants to wear headphones during a tournament, now it feels a little bit more of a safe space to maybe express and need that without getting a confrontational or judgmental conversation afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. And I think some really great advice there. And like, so a personal example. So I'm like red-green colorblind. So like red and green's on the similar color spectrum. I could not tell you the fuck what it is. Like it's either green or red. And I know at when we ran CryptCon, so I played against a guy, lovely gentleman, absolutely lovely gentleman. And he had like these dice, and they're like, there was like the weird pips and stuff like that, and I just couldn't read them at all. I was like, "What the fuck is this?" And I was like, "Hey, I really I know you got these special dice. I really appreciate it, but do you mind if you use the other dice? Because I literally can't read these dice at all." And he's like, "Yeah, no stress at all." Like I know it's a simple one, but it's just a common example.
Perfect example.
I've personal experience. Yeah, so it's very easy, and that
I was going to say, colorblindness is a great one, where if we look at games outside of Warhammer obviously has a lot of very easily identifiable objects. Like if you've got a Sisters of Battle compared to a Space Marine, doesn't matter if one's red and one's blue, like that's a Sister of Battle, that's a Space Marine. But if we're looking at things like board games or video games, there's a lot more accessibility dynamics with, these tokens, normally we have red tokens, orange tokens, blue tokens. Well, now we've got red tokens with a square in the middle, orange tokens with a triangle, and blue tokens with a circle. So even if there is a color blindness, nobody's having to ask for special consideration. It's baked into it. So that's a really great example, Sam. And I'm glad that your opponent was really receptive to it.
Yeah, he beat the shit out of me, but he was receptive to it, though. It was a good game.
It was the dice. His other dice were really bad, but you chose the loaded dice, so...
Fuck. That's I got way in next time though. It's all good. So,
Next time.
Next time. It's definitely the dice fault. It's definitely not my sportsmanship, my generalship, my deployment, nothing. It's definitely the dice. Easy example. So Dale in chat, Josh McMillan did a whole ANZ TC without a voice. Headphones can definitely be worked around 100%. So yeah, and I think there's like noise cancelling headphones, right? So he was able to be receptive and like very open and transparent about it. So good for him, and I hope others do the same or follow his footsteps. So really appreciate the chats, Kirby. So I guess before we wrap things up for this like mental health segment, before we talk about New South Wales stuff, do you have any like resources or advice or final comments you want to make?
Resources are so many. Any of the major institutions, particularly in Australia, like Phoenix Australia, Black Dog Institute, Beyond Blue, Lifeline, any of those big mental health organizations, Are You Okay? They've got lots of resources and can direct you. Normally, they've got some generic emails that you might be able to reach out and ask some questions for. The biggest one, if there's anything that you're experiencing, talk to your doctor, get a mental health referral, talk to a psychologist. We don't bite, we're not scary, we're humans as well. And I'm very conscious that your fit between a psychologist and who you're seeing is really important. So we call it the therapeutic alliance or therapeutic rapport, and it predicts 60% of your therapeutic outcomes. I could be the best psychologist in the world. I'm not, but if I was, it doesn't matter if we don't get along, we don't have a rapport in that space, it's not going to go well. You'll get something out of it, but less than 50%. While I could be the worst psychologist in the world, maybe I'm not, maybe not, who knows? But as long as we're following psychological processes and best practice, if there's a rapport, you're going to have a better outcome. So sometimes I've heard lots of stories where you might see a psychologist or two or a mental health professional or two, and it just doesn't go well. It's not the right vibe, it's not the right atmosphere. And then trying to go, it's like, I've just been really vulnerable and talked about some things and didn't land, I didn't feel supported, or it just didn't work for me. It wasn't the right space. It could potentially be that that psychologist wasn't the right fit, that wasn't the right time or place in your life to be able to talk about it. It can take a couple of attempts to find the right fit, the right match, and what's going to work for you. It is not one size fits all. I'm sure lots of people have heard of things like cognitive behavior therapy, and CBT can be helpful. That doesn't mean it's going to be the only thing that is helpful for anyone. There are lots of different therapeutic outcomes and tools there to use. Just because the first one hasn't worked doesn't mean that all of it's not going to work. And I know it is hard to go out and talk to somebody. As psychologists, we acknowledge that sitting on the couch or the seat across from us, like, hey, I'm asking you a lot of questions about yourself, and it's vulnerable. And our goal is to make that as safe a space as possible so you can do that. So if there's things that you want to talk about, even if it's not necessarily like, oh, I'm depressed or anxious, we all have emotional experiences every day. That's not the last census, but the census before, it's 1 in 2 Australians are diagnosed with some sort of mental health experience in their lifespan. 1 in 2. That's of the 2 people here, one of us statistically has been diagnosed with something. I'm of the opinion that that probably is a lot higher because, oh, hey, I've had a really crappy experience and maybe I'm feeling a little depressed. That doesn't mean we get diagnosed with depression. Depression, anxiety, and stress are normal experiences. The diagnosis is when that normal experience starts going for a really long time and having major impacts on those other functions. It's something we all experience, and I would absolutely encourage people to talk about it as much as possible, where and how they feel safe.
Yeah, I couldn't say it better myself, and probably for a good reason why, because you're fucking professional at this. So thank you for that. That was fantastic, and yeah, very, very good advice. So I guess maybe a bit of a lighter topic, but still a very serious topic. New South Wales at the ANZ team chance for 2024.
Yeah.
Woo!
Yeah.
So El Capitan, like what made you want to become a captain for the New South Wales team?
Look, I can't answer any of these questions anymore, Sam. You're from the ACT. You're living in Queensland now. You're the enemy. So we're just going to stare into each other's eyes really awkwardly.
Well, that's hot. That gets me. That gets me excited. So that's okay.
Going back to the question at hand, Sam. I've been obviously around Warhammer for a while. I've gone to ANZTC as part of New South Wales, I think 6 times. So twice in 5th, twice in 6th, twice in 8th. Yeah. So I think I put my hand up for a captaincy in 8th edition just before COVID hit. And I think that's I think Chris might have gotten the captaincy then, and obviously COVID then kind of derailed things. So it's been something that I've been interested in before. And I think we've got some amazing players in New South Wales. Looking at Team Australia, for example, we've got quite a few players that have been on Team Australia, got quite a few players that will go to other states and win tournaments in Queensland, which is a soft meta, by the way, and Victoria. So Tassie as well. I think we've had someone go down in Tassie. So we've got a really great player base, but we've also never come first. So I think in terms of expectations, wanting New South Wales to get on that top podium spot was a pity brig diver. We've had a few thirds. We've had 1 second way back in 5th edition. So trying to put New South Wales back in a pretty cool spot at maybe 1, 2, or 3 consistently would be great.
Yeah, that's fair. And like, obviously it's great you want to strive for the best, right? And get there. So, and I guess a very relevant question. So from Dale, so maybe a little bit of negative light, but it's still an important one. So a New South Wales team's question. So in the past, Team New South Wales has left players who get results out because they didn't fit the culture and image of Comp 40K that Team New South Wales wanted to project. How much did this come into the 2024 selections? Like, look, you just said there, I'm going for first, but we're going to take the rat bag that gets us positions, or is it the culture and vibe of things way more important?
Yeah, so I'm going to contradict myself because while we're aiming for top rostrum first, I would rather take a good bunch of lads and come last. But everybody talks to New South Wales as those were the best games and rounds that we had. So when we announced the team, we kind of went, these are the selection criteria that we looked at, and sportsmanship and conduct behavior, those were the first ones that we were looking at. I think we look at people like, particularly in Australia, Eric, Chris, Alex, who's now part of Art of War. We're not plugging Art of War at all on this enemy podcast. Don't like them. But we look at all these coaching services that now exist in Warhammer. And when I, back in the day, when I really started competitive Warhammer, that didn't exist. I mean, we didn't have regular podcast or YouTube videos. There's a couple blogs out there, but it wasn't the community or engagement that we've got now. So from that side, Warhammer, I think there's a skill to it, and that's a skill that can be taught. Hence, there are coaches out there. And obviously players like Chris and Eric are fantastic at what they do. And they're probably a little bit of, there might not be what they can do can be taught, but a lot of the other things can be. And that's a lot easier to teach than good sportsmanship. The behavioral dynamics and sportsmanship dynamics, that's kind of already set. Obviously, people can change, but that's going to take a lot more effort compared to we're going to sit down on a couple of weekends and we're going to really teach Warhammer here. Being able to have like some of those team events where we're going to nerd out for a couple weekends and we're going to trash every other state, but we're going to figure out, hey, like we've got Alex and Birdie on the team, teach us some of the tricks that you guys know, how that helps you win tournaments. And what I really like about hopefully what this opportunity will bring for us is, yeah, that might mean people like Birdie and Alex end up losing some tournaments in New South Wales, but the competition as a whole gets higher. We go back to our expectations. If you go 4-1, but you've lost a really close game against a really great opponent and you've had a really good time, your expectation might be to go win the tournament. But if your values aren't being attached back to that, it's like, oh, hey, well, I did my best and I just got beat on the day. Like Chris Wright beat me. Okay, it happens. I'm going to name and shame Chris right now. Chris beat me like 6 or 7 times in a row. And okay, like he's a better player. That was a really good experience. And then, oh, okay, well now we have another result which might go the other way. But that is a fun, enjoyable experience. Everybody who knows Chris knows he's an awesome bloke. He's fun to hang around with. He's great at Warhammer. That's the type of team that we'd ideally like to be able to have. Warhammer part's easier to teach, so we can do that. And not necessarily saying I'm going to be the one to teach him. I've got Chris on speed dial. I'm just like passing his information over to other people potentially. But being able to go, hey, we can teach this, we can work with this. And also our number one goal, while it might be to get number one, it is to do things right. If everybody walks away going, that was a blast against New South Wales, that's the goal. We looked at Australia. I think they when they won 2 years ago, they also got the Sportsmanship Award. Yeah, that's what we want.
Correct.
That's what we want to emulate. I'd rather have the Sportsmanship Award than first place. First place is obviously really nice, but that's the direction we're heading.
That makes complete sense, and that's a great standard, and like I guess benchmarked and left, right, and like when you have a great team that you can all bond against each other and have a great camaraderie, like you're able to be more open, like a good solid team. So that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And look, obviously a bit of a sneak preview. So next week, got Chris Wright talking about his new, I guess, coaching service as well as predicting the turn. So if almost at $40 an hour, you too can be good at Warhammer, hopefully. So I mean, I'm going to fucking sign up, hopefully. So look, I'll try and learn from him. I mean, it'd be silly not to. So yeah, that's awesome. You're able to have him on speed dial. So it's fantastic. So yeah,
Chris doesn't know that he's on speed dial, so I might send a message after this, be like, hey, I name dropped you and said you're on speed dial. Please don't contradict me.
Please don't contradict me, please. You can send me the invoice, okay? No, really funny.
It'll be shared by the team. We'll split it between the 16 of us. Yeah,
it was part of the terms and conditions. People didn't know, but you're paying up for it now. So you got to read the fine print, people. Got to read the fine print. You don't.
It was in white text on a white background.
Yeah, look, you should have hovered it over the mouse. Too good. So I guess obviously part of that balance, I guess, like that. So obviously preparing for ANZTC, it's a big event, like it's a big commitment. You want to go hard. How are you going to try and manage competing and studying and practicing whilst not receiving burnout? Is it trying to manage expectations and say, hey, it's okay to take breaks? Or how do you sort of balance that now that you've got I guess the squad of 16 and managing that dedication?
Yeah. So I think this, we've got, we're in December now, May. So we've got 5 months, because beginning of May. So it's not a whole lot of time. And obviously this time of year is pretty busy in terms of concepts like holidays and family commitments. So being able to set some dates where the team's engaging, see what the team's doing from what tournaments or things they're anticipating. We don't have a really long run into ANZTC. It's not like there's a little bit of a concept of here. We're wanting to try and set some foundation and culture around that sportsmanship. We're obviously really lucky in that we've got some really good players, I think, that have great sportsmanship and have had really good results as well. So we are kind of getting the best of both worlds there. But really wanting New South Wales to try to lead a lot of that, hopefully, and be, this is the best state. This is the state that's got the best blokes to hang out with and players, and always going to have a good game against them. That's the longer term concept. But in terms of the short term, I don't think we need to worry too much about burnout. We've got 5-6 months to prep and plan for this. Right now, we've got a data slate that's going to come up in a month and a half, maybe. Whether that comes out before Uprising or not, we're going to find out. We've got a couple of new codexes coming out. Whether or not we get another data slate or a couple more codexes before ANZTC, not sure. But as we're starting to go, okay, hey, we've got this new data slate. This is where some armies are pointing. Has Eldar just been thrown into the bin again? Have Custos just been blown up way too much again? Do Grey Knights finally get something? I know they won a GT the other weekend, but a bit more consistency there might be nice. So I think particularly post that data slate, there will be a lot more team-specific stuff that we might be engaging with. But up to that point, coming back to that team building experience, those team events, maybe even, hey, we're going to have some people, I've name dropped Chris, but Chris is maybe not aware that he's on speed dial, but having some of those more experienced players being able to do some education or coaching sessions around particular things keeps some of that engagement going, while being mindful we're not going to do Warhammer every weekend. Some people might, and that's okay. You want to do that, knock yourself out. But from a team's perspective, we're not going to have as much. And we're probably more going to be doing maybe monthly sort of things. And then once once we start getting closer to that post data slate, we're going to have a bit more increase in activity around that.
Yeah, more than fair. So more than fair. And like, I know it's part of that culture and stuff. You guys named Ben Hader and Tim Wallace as your coaches and stuff like that. So did you guys hire them as because they got the muscle and like they're just going to be security and just be rules enforcers at the tables? Like, I don't know, just imposing human beings and figures.
Yeah, so I've actually not told them this yet, but there's a palanquin, and they're just going to actually carry me around the floor because I'm very frail, and we don't want me to trip or anything like that. They're obviously both lovely guys. They love Warhammer. I'm really conscious. I think the biggest challenges that New South Wales has faced with things like ANZTC is we're so spread out. I'm conscious places like Queensland as well, they have a lot of spread, but I think a lot of their big hubs of gaming groups are a lot more centralized. Well, we've got like, Orange and Bathurst, we've got Wollongong, we've got Wagga, we've got Blue Mountains, Western Sydney, you've got Southwest Sydney, you've got Sydney, you've got North Sydney, you've got Central Coast, Maitland. Sydney in particular is also so difficult to get across, that Southwest Sydney to Sydney. Sometimes it's actually easier to go to Sydney to Maitland, depending upon traffic or where you're based. So having two blokes that obviously love the game, super enthusiastic, both well respected in the community, and they also come from different spaces. I know we've got Tim Wallace from up north as well, but having some better coverage around some of those gaming groups as well was a little bit of rolled into some of our decision making there.
Yeah, absolutely. And like when you can bring the muscle as well and someone who's going to support you on the palanquin, I mean, even better, right? So
I'm obviously the muscle Sam. Like I've been working out, I'm lifting 2 pencils every day. I'm going to be ready for this.
Yeah, you got the cycle going on. Your Popeye, someone's eating your extra spinach and stuff like that.
Actually,
so
you'll be actually.
So look, I'll look forward to it. Okay, you had a healthy diet. Change your diet.
Absolutely.
Just gain a couple kilos of muscle. Nice and easy. Look forward to it.
I'll try.
Have veins popping everywhere. Oh, too good. So I guess another question, about the New South Wales team. So when any like dates of when we sort of roughly announce the 8 or anything like that, or it's all to be confirmed?
You're really asking some prying questions, Sam. But it's our main thing is going to be after Uprising, depending when that data slate lands as well. We've penned it for sometime in February. So that's after Uprising. There's a couple other major tournaments. I think McGowan's running another Gladiator Teams tournament up in Queensland around the same time. And we're going to run New South Wales Masters sometime in February as well. So obviously, Benny had some personal stuff that he had to manage, and he's made announcements on the 40K page about that. And so that kind of delayed New South Wales Masters. That was going to be the original Selection 16 cutoff point. But this actually kind of helps us a little bit. We're going to do it in February. No plans confirmed or set, but once I don't know if Benny's announced who the new rep is.
He is. Greg Virginity.
Okay. Cool, awesome.
Everyone's got the ink flying out.
I don't want Benny to be blowing up my phone going, "What are you doing?" So obviously, having a chat with Greg and figuring out some times and dates around that and venues and stuff. So New South Wales Masters, February-ish, and that's probably going to be roughly when our cutoff is. I'm also really mindful, and this is something we observed last year, is we had that data slate just before ANZTC as well, and that threw a little spanner into the works in terms of maybe there are some other armies that we could have taken or not taken, and unfortunately, hindsight's 2020. Obviously, I'm sure every team could say something like that. Oh, I wish I didn't take this army and instead took this army or something like that. So where reasonable, we might have some concessions or some considerations if, hey, we've got a one army hero, for example, that's smashing it out. We'll use Grey Knights as an example because it's not an army that's getting a lot of attention. They're just like absolutely smashing it with Grey Knights, and then the data slate just completely runs them into the ground, and they've played nothing else. And they're like, I don't know how to play any of these other armies. There might be, we might need to have a little bit of flexibility there. That is the state of 40K right now. But also being mindful that this is not just, hey, we're going down to the local store for a weekend. We're traveling interstate. People might have to get time off from work. It's going to be an expense as well. So trying to give as much notice in Feb-ish, and then we'll see. We're going to do some surprise changes for all you other states out there. So.
Of course, go have the secret espionage and like make sure you get, plant some little secrets, but like some some little trips and traps. So looking forward to looking forward to seeing how you guys go, and it'll be a pleasure to meet you there. So any final plugs or shout-outs before we wrap things up, Kirby?
No, I just think I'm really keen to see how New South Wales goes. Again, I think we've got a great group of blokes, and there is a lot of really good applicants as well that didn't make the team this year. If we could take a team of 32, I probably could, and then we just have New South Wales completely take over the entire venue. So lots of great applications, and I really hope that people continue to apply. Obviously, we've got Greg now in the rep position. I think he's going to do a great job as well on continuing what Benny started with New South Wales, and really looking forward to see what we can do. We're going to have some events that have some fundraisers attached to them. We might be doing some little team events as well. We're definitely going to have some team practices. So keep your eyes peeled on the New South Wales Take 24 coaches. Dale, I will take 23 of you and then 1 Sam. Yeah. We'll
Too kind.
Yeah, but you can't rep Australian Capital Territory ever again after that. I know they're trying to keep you here on Friday. We've already talked about what they're going to do to you on Friday drinks, but so we're going to be doing some team stuff, some team practices. So anytime we're looking for players to help out with team practices, I would really encourage anybody that's keen on getting involved to be a part of that. We can never, I think maybe once we've had the team of 16 in the last couple of years actually all be able to get together in one space for practice. So always having a couple other people come along and help fill up those spots so we can get a full team practice in. Always worth it. Great to get your shoulders rubbing with some of the really great players we've got here, and keen to see how we all do.
I look forward to seeing how you guys go. I'm wishing you guys the best of luck. So, look, I'm still waiting to hear how we'll go with Team Queensland. So, I've applied to be as a coach or assistant. So, we'll see how we go. I hope to be there at the game center, the gaming arena. Apologies, Vic in April, May next year. So, it'll be great. So, looking forward to catch up again. So, and really, really appreciate your time and considerations. Like, really appreciate the chats. Obviously, it's not an easy topic to talk about, but I really appreciate your expertise and wise words and wisdom. So, really, really appreciate it, and hope some of you got some great advice out of it, because I know I certainly did. So really, really appreciate it. And look forward to talking to you again soon. So until next time, thank you everyone for listening. Take care. Talk to your parents and have a good one. As long as it's a good one. As long as they're good parents.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for having me.
No worries at all. Take care. See you everyone. Bye-bye.